Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we are going to sneak preview the full moon that is coming up in the sign of Aquarius. This is a full moon that will be engaging with Uranus, creating a T-square with the sun. So a very dynamic and busy full moon that's coming up. The full moon isn't until Monday, but we're going to take a look at it today to sort of prep ourselves because there are many accompanying transits that are happening right around the full moon that will also be taking place over the weekend. So it's a good time to start thinking about the full moon. We also have a whole bunch of planets creating a T-square in the mutable signs right now. So just a very dynamic full moon here in the month of August. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're seeing if we can get to 70,000 subscribers by the fall equinox. We are pretty close to 67,000 right now. So I don't know, maybe we'll get there, maybe we won't, but I've been really happy to see the results. We really appreciate all of you who've taken the time to subscribe to the channel. If you watch it regularly, if you're a newcomer, welcome. We hope that you'll be enjoying the content that we produce. I say we because it's me, but it's also a staff and team of people that most of you guys know support the channel as well. So anyhow, you can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. We are running a sale right now, so I want to take you over there on a brand new beginner's course. So if you go to the courses page and click Astrology Essentials, you are going to find our new beginner's course. This beginner's course is ideal for people who are very much brand new to astrology and are looking for an understanding of the language that can get you started. We have a first-year training program, a second-year training program, a third-year training program, and we also have a horary program. So we have 4 years of professional training curriculum, and a lot of people take that just for their own spiritual enrichment too. Astrology can be something that we use for ourselves, and astrology can be something that we use for others in service or as a career. So there's a lot of different reasons that people study astrology, but most of the time when people first start studying, it's hard to know where to go and what resources you can trust to understand what it is that you are listening to when you're taking in content or you're just getting to know your birth chart. So we have 8 modules. They're all recorded. These are not live classes. They're all recorded. You can go at your own pace. And this is meant to give people an introduction that would then prepare you if you are very much brand new to train in our first year program and our other programs, or just get you started in the world of astrology. Our last module is called The Best Ways to Learn Astrology. And we have some recommendations for you in addition to our courses as to what the best approach is for continuing to study and learn astrology as you start taking in content regularly, which a lot of people who are listening to this channel are doing, of course. So anyway, the early bird rate is down at the bottom. It's $199. This is a sale that lasts until August 27th. You can get this recorded course, and we release it mid-September. So this is like a pre-sale before the normal course is up and running and the normal price is listed. So you have until now and August 27th to pick up this class, and then we'll be delivering it. It will be ready and available by about September 15th. So that is how that works. The other thing I want to point you to is our live events. Coming up, we have my next monthly webinar, which is on the 8th house. On August 22nd, I'm giving a talk called The 8th House, the Place of Karmic Debts. This is a house that a lot of people get scared by or maybe have some major misunderstandings of. So we're going to talk about how this house is related to death, because that's always a big question, but more deeply, why this house has a long history of being related to karmic debts. So for better or worse, by the way. So anyway, if you register for the talk, you'll receive the link to attend live. And if you cannot attend live, you'll be given the recording afterward. So let us turn our attention now to the real-time clock so that we can begin unpacking this very interesting full moon. Here is, well, we've got the big arrow. The big arrow decided it was time. All right, here's the moon, full moon in Aquarius, with both the sun and the moon T-squaring, creating a T-square altogether with Uranus and Taurus. Remember that this is happening on Monday, but just prior to that, we have Mercury going through its cazimi over the weekend and also making a square to Uranus. And you heard me talk about that in another recent video that I did. So in the meantime, as if that isn't enough for a full moon, because that's a very dynamic full moon, we also have arguably one of the other major mundane transits of the year in Jupiter square Uranus, with Mars also conjoining Jupiter and also, or excuse me, with Jupiter squaring Saturn, Jupiter in Gemini, Saturn in Pisces, and with Mars having just conjoined Jupiter and then simultaneously squaring Saturn. You can see that here on the screen. And then, of course, getting into it at the exact same time now over the weekend and into the full moon is Venus. Venus will go through an opposition to Saturn and creating the T square with Jupiter and Mars. So we have effectively 4 planets creating a mutable T square, while we have another 4 planets, creating a fixed T square. We've got Mercury, the Sun, Moon, full moon, and Uranus creating a T square in the fixed signs of Leo, Aquarius, and Taurus. And we have Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars creating a mutable T square in Virgo, Pisces, and Gemini, all happening over the course of just a couple of days and all centered around the full moon. Right. So this is why most astrologers have this part of August circled as one of the busiest periods of the year. It is an incredibly dynamic period, and one that, frankly, the best way of describing it is to just say sort of between around the, say, 16th to the 21st of August, just buckle up, because it's a very, very dynamic period of time. And when so many different things are happening at once, it becomes difficult to, tie it all up and put a pretty bow on it. And no simple explanation will do, because you're working with, so many planets and so many combinations. But I've tried today to break down this full moon into some of the most basic features that I think are going to be the most reliably, like predictably reliable. Like these are the ways that I would summarize the major themes and patterns unfolding around the full moon. So the first is that we have a theme of Uranian disruption or revolution, another very Uranian word, in the fixed signs. So understand that in ancient astrology, one of the words that was used for the what we call fixed signs, was solid. And what that meant was that there's something that's very much through the process of a tropical or cardinal sign that has been birthed is now in solid form. And things in solid form are in a phase of maintenance. Like if you think of the Hindu trinity of, creator God, maintainer God, destroyer God or goddess, you have a similar idea or framework. I've heard astrologers compare the modalities of the signs to those gods many times before and always resonated with it. So in a cardinal sign, you initiate something. In a fixed or solid sign, in cardinal, also the word for cardinal is tropical in the ancient language, which means like a turning point, from the word tropos, to turn. So it's a solid sign, or a fixed sign is maintaining something. And so fixed signs, the karma that is associated with fixed signs, meaning the patterns in life that are associated with planets and fixed signs, are the hardest to change or the slowest to change, because there's something very stable and steady and solid and repetitive or enduring about that karma. So what makes it so interesting is that when you see Uranus going through a fixed sign, you often see, depending on which sign it is, you will often see deeply held structures of in our life changing. But they don't change easily. So, it's like, how does well, I would say, for example, like just to give you an example, people who watch my channel will be able to track this really easily. Uranus enters Taurus, which happens to be my first house in 2018. And over the course of Uranus working its way through my first house, I have gone through a very slow but very profound physical change. Like my body and my physical constitution have changed immensely, thanks in large part to emphasizing physical health, weight training, etc. So it's like that. It's like the patterns of your physique, your body, your health, they do not change overnight in a fixed sign, right? When you have a fixed sign rising and you have Pluto enter your first house in Aquarius and you're an Aquarius rising, you're talking about very deep structures of your mind and the way in which ideologies are related to your sense of self. And those are going to change over a long period of time, because that's the nature of a fixed sign. It doesn't change easily or quickly. So Uranus is getting close to the end of its work in Taurus, which means that we're starting to see the culmination and final transformations of some of the most deeply um, rooted and solid parts of ourselves or our lives. You can identify where that is in your life by looking especially at the fixed signs in your birth chart and the topics that are aligned with the whole sign houses that those fixed signs reside in. But the broad point that I'm trying to make here is that when you have Uranus, who is a god of revolution and who likes to rapidly evolve and shift and transform through sudden disruptions and sudden original eccentric breakthrough moments where pent up, stuck, or more stable energy is radically disrupted, that can be really difficult for fixed signs. It's interesting, in ancient astrology, feminine signs were said to be slower to change and more organic to change. So the slowest signs to change are going to be Scorpio and Taurus from that standpoint, because they're not only they're feminine and solid, which means the process of transformation that they imply is very organic and process oriented and slow. It's not Uranus and Taurus will create big disruptions and changes to Taurian earthy things, but because it's both earth, feminine, and solid, it'll take longer for those changes to occur. So anyway, now we're at the end. Uranus is at the end of a slower moving, more process oriented Taurian sign, a solid sign, and it's starting to finish a process that has been going on since May of 2018. So Uranian disruption in fixed signs is also affecting the signs of Leo and Aquarius. Of course, Pluto's recently entered Aquarius. So we can see that there's going to now be long, deep changes in another fixed sign from another long, slow moving outer planet. Pluto loves to transform in a different way than Uranus does, but nonetheless loves to transform things through this kind of purgation and upheaval and examination of unconscious material in relation to things like power and wealth and so on and so forth. But the point is that when outer planets are doing big things in fixed signs, especially at the end of them, we tend to see the final significant changes of things that are really deeply entrenched, that are slower and harder to change. And so that's exciting because this could signal some really significant breakthroughs in some of the areas in our life that have been most resistant to change, that have been it's been most difficult to accept the change that we know we need to make. So I think that's one way of looking at this overall. I know I labored that a little bit longer than I probably should have, but I hope it's useful for you to understand a little bit more about karma and modalities, because cardinal or tropical planets and cardinal signs or tropical signs, the karma and how it plays out in time is very different. They're like time signatures that are associated with the modalities of the sign and how the karma actually enacts. So fixed signs, slow, harder to change, a little bit more stubborn, set, but also more reliable in some ways. So, what are we seeing? We're seeing some very significant disruption to things that are very solidly held. And we're also considering that these are the culminating disruptions to fix things that have been gradually changing over 7 years. This full moon marks another really important moment of culminating change in fixed places. So that is a very broad way of thinking about it, which is usually more appropriate when you have so many planets doing so many things at once. You have to find ways of bringing it all together. Number 2 is revising or revisioning in double-bodied signs. So we have a Jupiter-Saturn square happening, of course, from Jupiter in Gemini, and Saturn in Pisces. And then we also have Mars moving through a conjunction with Jupiter in Gemini. And then we have Venus in Virgo hitting the T-square with both the planets in Gemini and Saturn in Pisces. So that double-bodied quality is also very strong this year, and is coming in a year where we had a major Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in a fixed sign. So we have this interesting pairing where there are culminating things happening in fixed signs, and continued, let's just call it continued, very important dynamic changes in fixed places. So that's the deep, heavy machinery, right? The fixed signs. There's a reason, for example, I think it's the Wheel of Fortune card in the tarot that has the emblems of the fixed signs on all 4 sides of the card. And that's because for ancient astrologers, the fixed signs were really thought of as the hubs of power in the zodiac. because the planets that express in those signs are often the strongest and most sort of like fortified, and also, unfortunately, if it's not such great karma, the most difficult to change. Anyhow, um, when we think about double-bodied signs, we think of what we call mutable now, but what was originally called double-bodied, and it really means of two natures simultaneously. So you have in all of the double-bodied signs, you have this way in which the sign is two things at once, and that's because the first half of the sign and the second half of the sign are riding off and sort of burning off the fixed sign or the solid sign prior, and then introducing and crescendoing into the tropical sign to come. And so they're called double bodied because they're thought to be of the nature of both solid and solid and tropical, or fixed and cardinal at the exact same time. So one of the things that's really interesting is that the double-bodied signs are like transitional spaces. They tend to be the spaces in which karma in our lives is in the process of undergoing transformation. And so you will see that, the planets that you have in your chart in double-bodied signs will often, there'll be like a strong duality inherent in the way that the planet expresses itself in your life. And the tension between the two over time is like a way of the karma around that planet sort of burning off and transitioning. And often double-bodied planets or mutable planets in people's charts look very different from the beginning of life to the end of life in terms of how they express and the kinds of growth that's happened relative to those themes or areas of the native's life. So anyway, when we have such great transits in double-bodied signs, like a big T square in a double-bodied sign, one of the things that it indicates is that we're in a transitional space. So that's really fascinating because it makes a kind of sense when you see that we're reaching a culminating place, a Uranian culminating place in fixed signs. Well, it's like deep, heavy stuff that's ready to change, that is in the process of changing, that doesn't change easily. And then we can see in this Jupiter-Saturn square this year, and this big sort of mutable T square that's coming through at the full moon, we can see that those signs represent a kind of liminal transitional space, all happening, by the way, during a Mercury retrograde this month. So when you put those two things together, you get the idea that the deeper, heavier structures of our lives that are in the process of significant change are now pushing us into a kind of liminal or transitional world. It's a world between worlds, that there's some kind of in between that we have to navigate between the old thing and the new thing. And we can feel like we're in a kind of waiting room, you could say, where we're having to make. It's sort of like, here's what I would liken it to. There's a phase of life that I think everyone probably knows. When you realize it's time to move, okay, it's time to move. That is like a fixed karma changing, because it's, so you've been at this place for a while, moving is stressful. It's a big, significant change to a very solid structure in your life. I'm going to move houses or whatever. Some people move a lot, right? So don't get me wrong, but you know what I mean? For a lot of people, it's like, oh, moving. But you're like, I'm going to move. Okay, there's the fixed karma that's reached the breaking point. This is done. We're moving. It's now an intention. The transitional space of the double-bodied signs accompanying that big change says stuff like, okay, now I've got a plan. When do I put my house on the market? How soon after that do I start looking? At what neighborhoods am I going to look? What's my price range? Got to get an agent. So the transitional space is gathering resources to create some kind of shift. And that's reflected by the Jupiter-Saturn square, which suggests major structural revisions in our lives in different areas. But there's this kind of liminal space that's coming up at the same time that a fixed karma is hitting another Uranian disruption or breaking point. So I'm moving, okay, now I'm in this transitional space where this big thing has shifted, but now I have to move into a transitional space that will bring me to the next thing. That feels to me like what this full moon period is bringing up, that kind of combination of energetics. Hope that makes sense. Number 3, a lot of Leo and Aquarius in the mix of the full moon. Mercury retrograde at the heart of the sun, Cazimi having squared Uranus, and then the sun squaring Uranus at the time of the full moon. And then, obviously the full moon's in Aquarius. Both are square to Uranus. So one of the things that comes up with Aquarius is the heavenly sense of what is ideal and perfect. And the um, like Aquarius provides us with the image of our potential, of our greatest um, our greatest potential, either as a species or um, as as uh, as a collective or as an individual. So the water bearer is Ganymede, who is the cupbearer to Zeus and represents a kind of beloved human being to the gods and something of the ultimate potential of human beings to be close to the gods in their nature, in their dwelling place. And so there's so much of what can we possibly be? What is the image of perfection that we can strive for in Aquarius? When you're seeing that paired against Leo, which is very much about the embodied heart and soul, like you're here on earth, you're living in a body, and there is a sense of being special just because you are you, just the pure steady flame of your existence. But the juxtaposition with Aquarius is, of course, maybe you could be more. And maybe there's so on the one hand, Leo can hear that as you're not enough, which then Leo absolutely does not like. Right? Just kind of personifying these things. But on the other hand, you could hear Saturn or Saturn's rulership of Aquarius is what I'm thinking of, but you could hear the sign of Aquarius sort of saying, look at how much more you could be, and ennobling the heart of Leo to aspire for things that are even more transcendental. So they play off each other perfectly. Leo often helps Aquarius come down to earth and just step into the heart of existence and accept the falling short and the death and the mortality that come with it as a noble part of creation. Aquarius has trouble with that. Leo, on the other hand, needs to accept the uplifting image of its own potential. And so they are playing off from each other. You have Mercury retrograding across the face of the sun, also hitting the square to Uranus. I think one thing that could come up right now, broadly speaking, is questions about self-worth and the ideal image of ourselves. In other words, there's some tension that we hold between saying, what can I be? What is the next best thing I can become? What is that image of what I'm striving toward in my life? And I have to hold that out as a worthy endeavor. I have to hold ideal images of my own potential in front of me and race toward it with all like heart and soul. Become my best self, become my highest self. On the other hand, if our ideal images are always something that we are falling short of, that we are judging ourselves in relation to and constantly saying, I'm unworthy, I'm not far along enough, then we may need to pull back in the opposite direction and say, I'm good just because I exist. So right now, the tension between how can I get better? What is my highest potential? And how do I work toward that without without becoming a harsh judge of myself and where I'm at right now. How do I aspire while also accepting exactly where I'm at? Those kinds of tensions, I think, are very much at the heart of what's happening right now. And it makes sense that they would be, because when there are such significant when there's such significant changes taking place, all this Uranian energy in the fixed signs, the Jupiter-Saturn square, suggesting such serious revisions, those revisions are probably there in part because we feel like we can be better or more than we currently are. And so here we go. At the exact same time, we have to be careful that we don't feel like we're being crushed under the weight of impossible standards that are just relentlessly, pounding us down. So that's something to watch for. Number 4 would be personal versus collective tensions. In what way am I an individual that stands apart from the group? In what way should I identify with various groups of people and belong to something that is bigger than myself? So just personal versus collective tensions very much in the air around this full moon. And then I would say, given that Venus is also going to be going through an opposition to Saturn and a little bit of a square to Mars that's coming up at the same time, I think it's nice that Venus has the square to Jupiter, which buffers all of this a little bit, but it does feel like there we may be reaching a crossroads in certain relationships. Could be work relationships, love, parenting, whatever it is, where we have to do something different, or we have to try a different approach, or a conflict of values needs to be discussed. And in some cases, there may be relationships that are ready to part ways. Venus opposite Saturn is often an omen of relational endings. And so if something can't be reconciled, or there can't be compromise, or learning to hold some kind of tension of the opposites in a relationship, it might be ready to let certain relationships go. But I would watch for relational tension building at the same time that all of these other themes are building, because Venus is squaring Saturn in the mix of all of this. Anyhow, I hope I hope you were able to follow most of that, trying to look at like what are the biggest, most universal themes spread through the couple of days around the full moon that we can work with. And I hope at least a few of these stuck out and were useful for you. So we'll end it there today. I hope you're having a good one, and we'll see you again soon.